if you're willing to start putting those keys in to the locks, not knowing, to what extent they're going to impact you, the issue that this catch-22 that you can run into is that to some degree, now you're changing your perception of reality. You know who Harrison Pope is? He's a psychologist who's done, I think he's finding stuff. He's a psychologist, done all the stuff sort of on anabolic steroid dependence and addiction and a lot of epidemiological work. And he has a paper, he's got a couple papers where he's sort of documented one of the idea that multiple studies have kind of done just surveys, and they're flawed to some degree because they go into gyms and they ask steroid users or people going to be anonymous.
Right. Yeah. Fill out the survey.
Fill out the survey thing. Right. And it shows depending on which of these studies look at, like 15, 20, maybe as much as 30% have dependence. They match the DSM criteria for dependence. So that's the risk. It's kind of like if you're going to start opening up those locks, when doing so, if you're someone who tends to have quote unquote an addictive personality, I'm using the kind of layman term here, then you have maybe about a 1 in 3 chance or 1 in 4 chance of developing a dependence where you can't help yourself but want to keep on wanting to stick different keys in, different steroids. And to some degree, that's the thing. You stick in trenbolone, a good example, right? It's like, this is a really good androgen. This is a really good key for the androgen receptor lock. Yeah. But it also, I didn't mean to stick it in the progesterone receptor. Whoopsie. What's going on here? And then we have all these issues where, one person says, hey, I'm doing like 600 milligrams of trenbolone and my sex drive is out of the roof and everyone's happy and, I'm doing things that I never thought I'd do sexually, what have you. And then someone else is...
this is very common. I mean, I'm in Thailand. I see it happen around me all the time. The sexual deviancy induced by trenbolone. I had a very good podcast with Dr. Dean St. Mart about the neurological effects about these steroids. And this is where the dependency comes from. Because your dopaminergic system is so upregulated. And now you get dependent on the superphysiological level of steroids. And whether that's testosterone or some of the other ones. I mean, this is one of the reasons why most people that come off after decades of steroid use, they're not as productive and their libido is not as high and their mood is not as good. It's exactly, I'll raise my hand the first one. I'll be the first one to admit it. This is exactly what I'm undergoing right now, right? Motivation and drive and all that stuff is just at an all-time low, even though clinically I'm still in the reference range, 600, 700 nanograms per deciliter. Like, you do create a little bit of a dependency. And that's why I'm secretly fantasizing about going back on TRT. Even though I'm fully functional. I'm fully functional. Right now, everybody knows. As soon as I start growing, people know exactly what's going on. And I'm transparent about it, right? I'm not going to hide it from people. But I'm secretly fantasizing about my next cycle and whatever that might be. Because I do feel that productivity is up, libido is up, basically quality of life is up. And this is the risk that everybody runs when they start dabbling with, performance enhancing drugs, particularly steroids. Once you get used to racing or driving at 100 kilometers per hour, going back to 60, it's kind of slow. But you're still driving.
The thing that's interesting, and I picked up on this in my learning German here recently, is when dopamine's released, that also causes the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is very important for forming neural networks, right? So our brain is basically, and I'm still in this kind of these thoughts from a guy named Manfred Spitzer. He's a German he's a physician and a sort of neurophysiologist. He talks a lot about cell phone use and social media and loneliness. And our brain, and those things are very closely tied, unfortunately. The more social media, the more lonely you tend to be on average.
Thank God we grew up in a day without it. Now we can utilize it to our benefits. But all these kids, I really worry for them. Fuck, that's where I'm going. Is that when you, for instance, if you're in a situation where your dopamine levels are elevated and you've changed the neurochemical state of your brain, every time you can't help but learn. Your brain is constantly, every time you have an experience, it basically leads to a mechanical changing. You're basically restructuring as they say, the neurons that fire together, wire together. So you're constantly learning. And the more excited you are about things,
the better your learning process, the more of this brain-derived neurotrophic factor goes. So if you're constantly you're up when you're on gear, let's say, you're basically rewiring yourself, your brain, to be one that, of course, functions on gear. You're sort of setting your brain up to have a dependency on that for what you cognitively, your perceptually would see as a normal way of being. So everything's then shifted, right?
Yeah,
and then when you come off it, right? And that's the side back to your question that sort of led us this direction is, if you're willing to start picking at putting those keys in to the locks, not knowing, to what extent they're going to impact you, the issue that this catch-22 that you can run into is that to some degree, now you're changing your perception of reality with the dopamine. You're changing your brain, essentially. And you can no longer then step back outside of yourself and as the watcher, so to speak, see how you've changed and what you're changing yourself into that you can't necessarily hold without this exogenous substance or these exogenous substances, which can be not the best thing for your health to hold you in place. So you lose your objectivity. And this is probably the worst with women, I think, because they respond so much to androgens, so tremendously to androgens, but their psychology can change, I think, even more so than men. Because we're already wired, generally to be in an androgenic way, let's say, whereas women, one of my best friends from years ago, she was a high level bodybuilder. She would have been a pro easily. Nowadays they've got the cards. And she said she learned so much because she was trained with a bunch of guys and they kind of made her into a lab rat, right? And they gave her a bunch of stuff and she just grew. She's okay. She came out of it all right. It didn't fuck her up. She's one of my best friends. She's super solid, but she'd been, in relationships and had been through her trials and tribulations relationship wise. She was actually grateful because she knew she had a sense that she knew what it was like to think like a man with those androgens in there. To think like, hey, okay, I'm done with you. Get out of my bed and go home. Like the stuff that, an asshole guy would do. She had those thoughts, and that's not her.
Right. No,
and she could step
but that's
back and
androgen mediated. Yeah.
It's androgen mediated, and it's not, Robert Sapolsky would say testosterone makes us pro-social. And maybe some androgens make us pro-asshole. I don't know exactly.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. And it's the same as alcohol in that extent, right? If you're already in a little bit of a asshole tendency before you drink alcohol or before you take the Trenbolone sandwich, then you get worse on it. Now, I vouched never to touch Trenbolone 8 years ago when my wife kind of asked me to stop. So I haven't touched it in such a long time, and most of my progress I've made since then. So I do know that you can make progress without the Trenbolone sandwich. But you do notice, and on Tren, you don't notice how much of an arrogant a-hole you are, right? And how single-mindedly driven you are for your bodybuilding tendencies and nothing else. Right? Forget about making money or doing other stuff. You just want to train, eat, sleep, and fuck, basically, on Tren, or the high enough dose. And then you come off of it, and again, you can take a step backwards for running that amount of androgens, and then you realize like, wait a minute, I was a different person. Sexual deviancy and aggression and all these weird things started to happen to my body, but in the moment you don't realize it because it feels so normal. And then when you do come off it, you realize like, wait a minute, I was different. I realize it now that I'm different compared to being on just basic TRT, even though I will say that I like myself more on TRT than I do now.
Right.
Just from a business perspective, like there's so many guys using TRT for their entrepreneurial benefit because they feel more driven and they can work longer and they sleep better and all these little underlying issues that they had while being, with a testosterone of 500 to 700 nanograms per deciliter, they no longer have because now they're at 1,000 or 1,200, maybe slightly super physiological, and they feel 10 times better. And then all these little issues that they would be frustrated about, loss of motivation or loss of sleep or whatever, those are non-issues, and thus they can perform better. This is why TRT is so popular now. And of course, the dopamine levels are positively correlated with testosterone levels. So the higher testosterone is, the higher your dopamine levels are going to be. And thus the brain-derived neurotropic factor goes up and you can learn more and be more productive and memory or recollection and that kind of stuff. So it is hard to stop after you see that your income goes from, let's say, $50,000 to $100,000. and we'll leave it up to the audience to think if that's per year or per month. It can be a big difference. Yeah, it can be a big difference.
Yeah,
it can be a big difference. Yeah.